Out of the gates and ready to go. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow underway. The Friday edition has arrived. Glad you're with us as we broadcast live from OutKick.com/watch. Kelly in Vegas joins us later this hour, plus John McClain previews the NFL divisional rounds. One big thing on every game this weekend and plenty of headlines. Chad, good afternoon.
Longest week of my life, Hutton. This feels like the longest week of my life.
With all the snow, the ice,
a lot of cabin fever, and I'm someone even getting out of the house to come do this show.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing cabin fever, so I'm ready to plow through these next 2 hours. Feels like Sunday, but it's Friday. We're in day 2 of our weekend on this show. Weekend starts on Thursday here on Hot Mic, so I'm ready to go.
Feels like Groundhog Day for Sports Illustrated, SI, which has been flailing for a while. And today, news coming down from the union representing their workers that layoffs are happening because the Arena Group, which operates Sports Illustrated and has for a while now, missed a quarterly payment to this publishing company that has since revoked their license to publish. So SI, as we know it, and it's been this way for a while, but SI with all the covers and glorious articles, deep dives into your favorite athletes from years past, the 70-year-old publication, in effect, done. And here's the statement from the Sports Illustrated Union and the News Guild of New York on the layoffs. We fought together as a union to maintain the standard of this storied publication that we love and to make sure that our workers are treated fairly for the value they bring to this company. It is a fight we will continue. Earlier today, workers of Sports Illustrated notified that the Arena Group is planning to lay off a significant number, possibly all, of the guild-represented workers at SI, a result of Authentic Brands Group revoking Arena's license to publish. And they go on to say, we expect that the Arena Group to honor all terms of our union contract and will fight for every one of our colleagues to be treated fairly. This is a 90-day notice for some, effective immediately for others, and Chad, every time I think of SI and what it was compared to what it is and where it's going, which is nowhere, I think of the covers, collecting the covers growing up. Favorite athletes, great photos, faces in the crowd with high schoolers across the country. I mean, that's all just gone from what it was.
Well,
even SI.com.
Is it gone, though? This is such a confusing
gone,
story that's taken place here. So Authentic Brands Group that owns the license to Sports Illustrated. Arena Group runs Sports Illustrated. Arena Group, by the way, the one that had that genius idea to have fake people write articles that was really AI and pretend that it was actual writers doing it, and they got busted doing that. And if you remember, I think it was Authentic Brands Group who owns the license but had to basically say, oh, this is the other group we hired. And it was
right.
Arena Group and something they were doing. We didn't know what they were up to.
They were the one publishing it, yes.
We've discontinued that practice, right? So they put all this out there. They send out the memo, which is circulated, that essentially says everyone that has anything to do with Sports Illustrated is laid off, either now or later. But we'll get to the rest of that. But it says it in sort of a confusing way. So now Pat Forty, who is maybe the most popular writer, the most famous writer, currently writing for Sports Illustrated, he posts on X, to correct some erroneous reporting, Matt Lombardi of the Arena Group said, quote, we are going to continue to operate Sports Illustrated. Either Arena or someone else is going to have the license to operate Sports Illustrated. Forty goes on to say the entire staff was not laid off. There still is a website and a magazine. That said, ugly, brutal day with many layoffs. Nothing quite like hearing colleagues and friends saying they just got termination emails in real time while on a union Zoom call. Please lend your support to these folks. That from Pat Forty. Pat Forty has not been laid off by Sports Illustrated. Yet I've also read an email from Arena Group that basically says everyone that has anything to do with Sports Illustrated is laid off. So I don't know if Pat just hasn't gotten the memo yet or he's got some form of information coming directly from Lombardi of Arena Group that they are going to continue in some fashion at Sports Illustrated. Regardless, sad day for sports fans everywhere because, as Hutton was saying, this was an institution for years and years and years. This was my childhood. Having a subscription to Sports Illustrated was big time in the Withrow household. And being able to look through stories, see that award-winning photography, everything else that went with it, and having that be a conduit into understanding sports more is a big part of a lot of people's lives. And look, it's not been the same for a long time. I'm not going to sit here and pretend. I probably stopped having a subscription to Sports Illustrated when I was 25 years old. It's been a little while since I've actually read a Sports Illustrated. And they had a hard time adjusting to a digital age, like a lot of other media companies that had been around for a long time that specialized in print. So they're not unlike a lot of different groups, but it's still sad to see this story and know that Sports Illustrated likely dead.
Remember when if you subscribe to ESPN, you automatically received ESPN the magazine?
Yeah.
Because they were trying to keep that going and afloat, and then they discontinued that. I don't remember Sports Illustrated ever doing that.
Like the automatic subscription?
The automatic subscription, whether you wanted it or not, you were going to receive it.
I feel like you'd have to subscribe to Sports Illustrated. Maybe you could get a couple of other subscriptions for a lot cheaper.
Or you get a hoodie.
But Sports Illustrated was never that cheap one,
you
right?
get the SI pullover or whatever it was back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
you'd get like a bag that had Sports Illustrated on it, too. Yeah. There were a lot of different items they'd send out.
Yeah, the SI cover, though, I mean, your team, your favorite teams or athletes were competing for that. Or at least you were arguing why it was the story of the month, story of the last 2 weeks that should be on the cover.
Yeah.
And everyone has their own favorite cover based on their favorite teams growing up. You mentioned Pat Summitt on the cover. You've got Javon Curse with his entire hand taking up the entire front cover of the magazine, which is crazy. And then, of course, McGuire and Sosa going back and forth was classic. I missed that. But it hasn't been that for a while. You mentioned the transition to the digital age and just the online portion of it. Whenever Time Magazine, Time Inc., sold it, I believe to Meredith Group.
Yep.
That's when the downhill version of this really started. And I mean, it's now it's just kind of a hodgepodge of blogs and things like that for the most part. I mean, that's how I view it. It's not easy to navigate either, which is odd for that publication. It hasn't been the same. And I'm quite frankly not surprised about where we are. I mean, they missed a $3 million payment, which automatically triggers like a $45 million fee that's now due to Authentic. So they could renegotiate and still be in business, but they're laying off employees. Specifically, it looks like the union workers.
Now, I would be curious to see. I think it's pretty clear with this announcement, the memo sent out, forfeiting on the loan and the payment and all of that. This iteration of the Arena Group running Sports Illustrated is dead. Is the Sports Illustrated brand dead forever? Because someone's going to be able to possibly pick this up for pennies on the dollar and then do something different with it. I'm not saying it's going to be the same Sports Illustrated. It's certainly not going to be in print.
Who's the guy
or anything like that?
From 5 Hour Energy that introduced himself as their new boss or whatever, a few months ago?
He said, I was reading a story where he called everyone, there's a lot of people who are worthless here. You're doing a lot of worthless work.
Yeah. And I think that was involved into the AI aspect of things.
Well,
everyone should be doing multiple jobs.
It was a bizarre 90-minute Q&A that he did with all the employees. It's from Front Office Sports. I'm going to find the story with the exact quote on it because it's pretty startling when you hear the quote from this guy. There's so much floating out there around. But my question, though, Hutton, is this can't be the death of Sports Illustrated forever. There's going to be some entrepreneur out there or media company that decides, I'll buy that for next to nothing. And I'll turn it into a website or turn it into something with a Sports Illustrated name.
Yeah, but the name itself, though, what weight is that if you're not who you were?
I don't think they've been who they were for years.
Right, so I don't know if the value for SI, as I remember it, it's not that, right? It's not the publication that it once was. It's not the long-form articles that you're going to flip through and read or scroll through and read. I just don't know if it's not that, Chad, isn't it no different than any of these other websites you can go to right now? No, everything's just kind of the same.
It's no different. My point, this is dead. They've been killing it for a little while now with everyone involved in it in this Arena Group. And I think that the official death knell probably really happened when the story broke they were using AI and using fake writers in that, right? Minaj Bhargava is the founder of 5 Hour Energy. So my question here is there's got to be someone who can see an opportunity and say, there's a lot of outrage now about not great sports journalism going on out there. What if we got a select few writers or people who are good online, put them under a new Sports Illustrated brand and made something of it? I'd be interested in that if I had the resources to go and buy Sports Illustrated for next to nothing and try to make it what people of maybe our generation or older think of Sports Illustrated and do something different with it that could be profitable, something that the people that are running Sports Illustrated now could never do. So Bargava, who took over, the founder of 5 Hour Energy, he had a meandering 90-minute town hall session in December. And one of the quotes he said to all the employees was, "No one is important. I am not important. The amount of useless stuff you guys do around here is staggering." And this is when Bargava Simplify Inventions agreed to purchase roughly 65% of the Arena Group back in August. That was a $50 million deal. So Bargava and Simplify Inventions own 65% of Arena, which Arena is in default on their payment to the licensing company that owns Sports Illustrated. This is where it just gets complicated to me and all the different hands
unless this
involved
guy
in this.
who's have a lot of useless people doing useless jobs. I mean, if you want to lay off people and you want to do it this way, this is how you go about it. I mean, that's the other theory with it. If you're looking to have just mass layoffs.
Don't pay the licensing
you're
fee
in
and then
default,
allow
and
it to blow up.
Lose your publication access.
Just give people more
your
5 Hour
license.
Energy. Maybe they'd be less useless if they did that.
Maybe so.
If it really worked.
I bet there are a lot of bosses though out there that are like, there's a lot of fluff. A lot of people that aren't held accountable to what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, and I think that there's two extremes here, right? There's the Bargavas of the world who are these, newfangled millionaire, billionaire guys who are all just about, hey, nothing's real, nothing matters. It's all an algorithm. It's all this. And if you don't have eyeballs on it, doesn't matter one bit. And then you have the Writers Guild out there, and I've seen a number of them now in media that act like everything they do is, breathtakingly important and beautiful to the world. And it doesn't matter if one person doesn't read it or one person does, they should have their jobs protected for eternity. And that's also not the reality of business. So the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I think you've got a couple of extremes here of Bargava coming in and saying, boy, you guys are useless and you spend a lot of time on useless stuff. Then you have Writers Guild, capital J journalists out there. They're like, how dare you ever challenge one of our jobs? How dare you take this institution under with you? This is just a complete crock. And I side more on this story with the capital J journalist than Bargava or someone else. But the bottom line sometimes is the bottom line. You got to find a way to make it work from a business standpoint. If you're going to have a ton of staff and pay a bunch of money out, you got to find a way to make it work. The hope is you have smart people running a company that understand digital, that understand where things are going, and can help make it work alongside good talent and alongside good journalism and writing and all of those things. And it's clear to me that Sports Illustrated lacked all sides of that, quite frankly, because even the journalism part of it, there's some good writers there. There's some good people there, one of which comes on our show who does a very good job, and Michael Fabiano. We got to find out from him if he still has a job with Sports Illustrated. I think Pat Forty's pretty good. Yeah. Also, I disagree with him on a lot of stuff, but I think overall he's a pretty good sports writer. You need more of that, and you need more and better business sensibilities in a new digital world. Sports Illustrated lacked it.
Chad, Bargava, by the way, 5 Hour Energy, his fortune, $4 billion is the worth here. He also, in his past, he is a former monk, and he has dabbled in a variety of jobs. Taxi driver, construction worker, printing press operator, and business manager. I
never expected a monk to come up with 5 Hour Energy. When you think of the monk lifestyle, Hutton, the last thing I think of is 5 Hour Energy or a monk becoming the guy who invents 5 Hour Energy. Really went away from that lifestyle.
So we need more of the journalism that Sports Illustrated was. Chad, we need more of a press conference that was Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh.
Look, if you want any type of evidence as to why Mike Tomlin has never had a losing record in the NFL and been able to stick around with consistency and be who he is, and unabashedly who he is at every time. And sometimes who he is walking out of a press conference when someone starts to talk about his contract after he just lost a playoff game and he's pissed off. And then we saw the other side of Mike Tomlin come in and joke about it and say, I didn't handle that very well. I don't know many coaches who are thinking about those things on game day, especially after a loss, and I didn't handle it well. But now, does anyone have any questions about my contract? Because I'm happy to talk about it a couple days later after the season ends, and he did it beautifully. He stood up there. He took questions. He talked about his status. He said that security is great, but it doesn't really concern him that much because he knows who he is and he knows what he's about and what this team is all about. He doubled down on Kenny Pickett right now being the guy, but he also guaranteed there's going to be competition because we don't anoint anyone around here, anything. There's always going to be competition for that top job. He said, I'm not going to hire in-house. I am going out of house to hire offensive coordinator because this offense this year was not good enough. And it wasn't good enough for Matt Canada, and he probably kept him hanging around too long. It was one of those moments, Hutton, where I'm thinking, if I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, it's tough to feel great about this team and quarterback and offense and all of that, even though you got to the playoffs. There are a lot of other teams that didn't make the playoffs that feel far worse about their fortunes and about their franchise and team right now. But the Pittsburgh Steelers do expect more. They're disappointed in this season. But if you watch that press conference and watch Mike Tomlin, I can't think of a single Steelers fan that's not at least a little bit encouraged about what he had to say, about the accountability he showed, about his measured approach to looking outside of the family to go find someone to coach offense, and the fact that while he says we like Kenny Pickett, he's shown some good things, he's the starting quarterback right now, but it's going to be with competition. I think you got to like everything he said in that press conference, and it goes to show you why he's eventually going to be a Hall of Famer because of his career and his level of consistency.
Here's Tomlin speaking with the media earlier.
Good afternoon. In a little better mood today, man. Anybody got any contract questions? I'll say this. I certainly could have handled that situation better than I did, but I'll also say this. I just believe there's a time and place for everything, and post-game press conferences are probably not the place to address contract issues and things of that nature. It's just a very individual thing, and on game day, I doubt any of us are in that mindset. Certainly I am not. What's required to do what it is that we do, the amount of focus pouring into a collective, I'm just not in that mind state, and I just don't believe that's the appropriate venue to talk about things of that nature. Certainly open and willing to do it today in this venue.
So the reports are the Steelers are wanting to get something worked out more long term because Tomlin's contract will expire at this time next year, right after the season concludes. And it was thought that maybe Tomlin takes a step back and wants to take a year off. The reports were he was going to spend time and talk with his family about what to do next following the postseason, which ended at the hands of the Bills on Monday. That led him to want to coach and continue and either work out the rest of his contract, which is one more season, or see the investment made by the Steelers from their front office in extending him more long term. I think what's behind the scenes aspect, Chad, is, well, do they want me here long term? Has it run its course? Where are we? Where are we going? What's the path? You know, working with new management in some cases, changing coordinators. Quarterback is Kenny Pickett. And he's right. He hasn't handed anything to Kenny Pickett. They didn't do it whenever he came in. And he had to fight for the job to get his opportunity in his rookie season. But they've got a lot of different aspects that aren't broken, but just need to be, they're just dull. You know, they need to be polished a bit. Tomlin's the guy to do it. Pittsburgh's making the right decision by extending him if they do. If Tomlin doesn't want to do it, so be it. If he wants to work out the contract and see what's out there, whatever. But I, for one, am glad that he's not just taking a year off. I am interested to see if he's truly invested in what he says there, because he's going to have the opportunity to sign something more long-term. And if he does, Pittsburgh just continues to be the organization that everyone should point to for that continuity, stability, and consistency, because they've got it. They're not winning. They haven't won in like the last 5 trips to the postseason, I believe. Yeah. But you're consistently there. A lot of coaches that have won playoff games in between when Tomlin did and to now. A lot of coaches that aren't in their jobs anymore because they got there and never got back after winning a playoff game. Tomlin's going to be consistently right around there in one of the best divisions year in and year out in football. consistent division play too.
Yeah, I mean, look, if it was one of those, you got to blow it up and restart completely, then there would be more questions about, is Mike Tomlin the guy? To me,
Yeah.
is he the guy to restart it and do things differently and rebuild completely? Fine-tune, I think, is the right phrase here for what needs to be done in Pittsburgh. It's not a blow-it-up situation. They're a team that's in the playoffs. I'll also say for that playoff streak, which is bad for Tomlin, where he hasn't won a playoff game, I can't really look back and think of a lot of times where I felt like they were the better team and lost the game. So they've got to elevate, right? It's one thing to be there in the mix and have a winning record, but they got to get to the point where they're that dominant team going into the playoffs. They got to get to the point where they can have disappointment in the playoffs like the Ravens have had, like they could have if they lose this playoff game as the number 1 seed. The Cowboys, another example, having that disappointment of being the team with expectations going into playoffs. There haven't been a ton of times recently where I think of Mike Tomlin and the Steelers going into the playoffs with a ton of expectations based on who else is there in the AFC. He's got to be the one to figure out a way to elevate that roster, elevate that offense, and make them a team that could be disappointed by a playoff exit at some point because you're expecting bigger things out of them. Feels like it's been a little while since we've expected huge things out of a Steelers team. It's just more of that consistency that you see of being pretty good to good, but now can he get them from that to great? That's a question mark, but I think in this press conference, he showed everything I wanted to see for a guy that can do it.
It is, and it's also like fascinating. You had the group of Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and not much to show for it. But also, it's an organization that moved on from all three eventually, and they're still making the postseason. That's unusual when you have a trio like that, and they all go their separate ways for different reasons. Le'Veon Bell sitting out a year, Antonio Brown going off the deep end, and Ben Roethlisberger staying a year too late instead of retiring a year early. But even that year, I believe it was 12 wins for the Steelers there. Tomlin deserves to stay. He should stay.
Yeah, you usually get a 3 or 4 win season after that when your nucleus is done.
Doug Peterson in Philly had a 4-win season, I believe, 4-11-1, whenever he had to meet with management and explain, okay, here's the vision, here's where we're going to get out of this funk. Nick Sirianni's having to do that right now with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Florio put this up, and I think he's right. If they're going to keep Sirianni, and now it feels like they will, the Eagles aren't likely to just release a statement from Jeffrey Lurie, from management, whoever, and say, hey, we're keeping him. Because that's something that Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys would do. If you're keeping your coach and you're acknowledging that, hey, we're going to keep him, you're also acknowledging that he was on the hot seat and you weren't really sure about it. So if he's under contract, and he is through 2025, you just go about your offseason business as usual because you have your exit interview just like you would normally have following a season that concludes, in this case, in a huge landslide in a negative direction, and winning one game out of your last 6 tries, including a blowout loss in the postseason to Tampa, who won a terrible division. Chad, the sales pitch, there doesn't need to be a sales pitch. There needs to be a fix, a solution. You're not selling the organization on what you're doing. You're finding a solution to what's broken. And something there is just gone awry internally, and it happened quick. I mean, I view it as a team of front runners. However, I can't explain to myself when saying that why they're 10-1 and then the landslide happened. If it's a team of front runners, why is it happening when you're 10-1 in the middle of the regular season, fighting for a trip back to the Super Bowl to break the trend of teams that lose the Super Bowl and what they do the following season? I don't get it. But around that time is whenever Jalen Hurts went to the podium and said, hey, we're not committed. We need to find more commitment. And then you had A.J. Brown get hurt. You have a defensive coordinator who was fired. Matt Patricia comes in over the final 6 games. They allow on average 30 points per game in those games and their losses. I don't understand what went on behind the scenes. Something is absolutely broken, and Sirianni's in a mess. And he's got to show the full leadership that wasn't there in the middle of the season to get it back on track. Otherwise, he's not the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles for much longer.
And a lot of whispers about A.J. Brown being a part of the problem, attitude-wise. the issue that I keep coming back to is a lot of the things I'm hearing about are guys you don't want to part ways with because you're really good players, right? I mean, it's one thing if, hey, this one guy who we could do without has been an issue. If you're Nick Sirianni and you're saying that, and we need to get rid of maybe these one or two guys, or it's a coaching issue on one side of the ball, there's something deeper and different about this collapse from the Eagles. And I can't quite put my finger on it as to what exactly it is, but there's something different about their falling apart late this season than I've seen with other teams. And I don't think you fire Nick Sirianni given his early success in his tenure and going to the Super Bowl the year before. But I need to hear some good answers on what the problem is and how they're going to fix it if I'm ownership with the Eagles. And I don't know what it is.
Well,
I don't know if it is just one thing or if it's a bunch of things.
I think it starts with the coaching staff, that changing up some things. I think Howie Roseman's already started to facilitate some of those chats with outsiders who could come in and maybe fill a role in the staff. The other thing, too, is there was a report recently that said that Sirianni was meddling with play calling. And so if that's true, and you're in the middle of just a role where you're winning games, but nothing was really consistent with Philadelphia. They got off; they were slow out of the gates, but they still won games. The game in New England early on in the season comes to mind, where it was too close for comfort. Mac Jones and company had the ball late with a chance to go win the game, and I think the offensive lineman was stopped inches short in that game of a fourth down play on a fumble recovery. Nonetheless, I mean, you've got to change things up to where you fix where is the commitment and why did it go the opposite direction, but also the consistency of what they were in 2022 and why it wasn't there in 2023. A.J. Brown he's an alpha and he's a diva. He's a combination of both. And he and Hurts are really good friends. Even before the trade, he was not working out with Ryan Tannehill that offseason. He's working out with Jalen Hurts. And then the trade happens a few weeks later. So I don't see that becoming anything more than friends that have some friction. But does he have friction with the coaching staff? Does he have issues with others? Sure, AJ can do that. He can rub people the wrong way. I do know that when you throw him the football, he produces. And, Chad, you're right. That's one guy you're not going to get rid of. Although
it's a guy everyone would want on their team.
His contract, they have after really a 3-year contract. So they should have one more year left before that out contractually. And, I mean, that lines up with Sirianni, too. He's signed through 2025, but he'll have another year to prove it unless whatever this discussion comes of, whatever the details are, blows up and they decide, yeah, you're not the guy, you're out. That's the only time we'll hear from the Eagles.
I keep thinking about Cowboys-Eagles next year for 2 games, and both of those teams in this point where it is such a prove-it season now for both of them. I didn't think we'd be saying that about the Eagles after a 10-1 start. I thought it would just be more of a continuation of great times for Eagles fans and for that coaching staff, and then they fall apart. And then we know what happened with the Cowboys with all that expectation, 2 seed going in, get blown out at home by the Packers. Both those teams, Hutton, those 2 games and that division is so critical for both those head coaches now with Mike McCarthy. And we know Mike McCarthy, it's a go out there and win big in the playoffs. You're probably done with the Cowboys given his lame duck status with the contract. But Nick Sirianni also now in that same boat of you got to go out and prove it if you're going to keep your job. NFC East is always something to talk about. It's certainly going to be that next season with those 2 teams.
Chad, critical and pivotal movement for both teams next year. 2 quarterbacks with some we'll pivot one way or the other this weekend. Josh Allen, let's start with him. Where the inconsistency since the overtime matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs in 2022, that was a fantastic performance in game. The guy that's throwing all over the field loses on a 13-second drive that led to him not getting the football back. And then what the narrative is now compared to what it was. He has a chance to get back to that version of the perception that he is across the league. He's a great player. But you're measured with your greatness based on what you do in the postseason. This is where we determine the hierarchy of quarterback play in the NFL this time of year. Patrick Mahomes has that. He's gone out, he's won games, he's grabbed the brass ring, he's done it. Josh Allen has a chance to do it this postseason. It's right in front of him yet again. They're hosting the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. They're hosting a Chiefs defense that is phenomenal. They're also taking on a Chiefs offense that is not putting up and boasting these big numbers that we're used to seeing from Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and others. They're dropping passes instead of catching touchdowns. This is where Josh Allen needs to be the one dropping in passes, throwing dimes, not interceptions. And we've seen the best of both. Countless times we have seen incredible Josh Allen. Other times we have seen him on a consistent basis go to the podium after a game and say, yeah, I just got to do better. I just can't throw these interceptions. And those are on days or nights where he's thrown 3 or 4 picks that has led to close games, but has led to a loss in Buffalo. That cannot happen this weekend against the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round where you're hosting in Orchard Park. Cannot happen. Otherwise, all of the hype that surrounds the Bills, that surrounds Allen and what they should be doing, it then turns into what they could have done, not what they're going to do. The same can be said for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, about to be a 2-time most valuable player in the NFL. Not going to be unanimous like he was the first time, but I think it's pretty much unanimous that everyone agrees he's going to have the votes to do it. I think it's also a foregone conclusion that if he loses this game, we'll look back on a 1-4 playoff record for a guy that was phenomenal in a regular season. Again, unanimous. Everyone agreed he's the MVP. That same year in the postseason, the Tennessee Titans go on the road. They win in Foxborough against Brady in his final game as a Patriot. They then go on the road in the divisional round and not just beat the Ravens in what was a great atmosphere. They take advantage of Lamar Jackson throwing picks on the opening drive. They became the offense that Lamar Jackson was supposed to be running. They shut him down whenever he decided to run. And while he threw all over the field and had these massive numbers, when you look at the end result, it's a playoff loss, not a win. His lone win, though, came on the road here in Nashville in a sloppy game, but albeit a win where he advanced. That's the one area you can point to and say, yes, he has won in the playoffs. But the narrative with him is it's time to prove it. That's all he's done this year, by the way. Coming off of an offseason where he's practically laughed at for demanding the fully guaranteed contract of Deshaun Watson and showing his value. Everyone pointed to his injuries. He can't stay healthy. He's done the opposite of that this season. He's about to go win an MVP again. And Chad, it's time for him to go win in the playoffs because with him and Allen, the perception versus the reality, well, the reality is right now, this is not their time of year. The reality, though, can change where the two should be matching up in the AFC Championship game.
Well said, Hutton, and a big prove-it moment for both these guys. A huge moment, and not just proving it, but just a big opportunity for both these guys to change sort of the course of how they're thought of when it comes to playoff football. I have to share something. I don't often do this, but, you know, everything's content at this point. So I will share this text that I got from my brother-in-law, the biggest Bills fan that I know from Western New York. This was sent to our family group text about who to root for this weekend. And everyone in our family cheering on my brother-in-law, PJ. They've all picked the Bills as the team, the sentimental favorite to advance. It's a little bit long, but it's worth it. Trust me.
Does he light the table or go through the table?
This is a text. Now, he's anti-table. He said his generation does not do that. That was the younger generation that started it.
Just watch.
So PJ writes, I've been a Bills fan for 50 years. I was born into it, so I don't really have a choice. Not really anyway, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It goes beyond following a team. People in Western New York are some of the best on the planet, much like here, talking about Middle Tennessee. Following the Bills is a microcosm of growing up there. You have to be resilient. At the turn of the 20th century, Buffalo was one of the leading economic powers in the country. We are at one end of the Erie Canal and had massive steel production. I think the second or third wealthiest city in the country at that point. 1903, the Pan American Exposition was hosted there, which was the biggest deal ever up to that point. Also, the first major event that electricity was ubiquitous at. World-changing. And then President McKinley got assassinated during that event. The symbolic rug getting pulled right out from underneath Buffalo. Like wide right. Like losing 4 Super Bowls in a row. Getting up off the floor after everyone and coming back to fight again. We share this with friends and families. I have so many memories of going to games with friends and family, including when I was in college, an hour and a half away. A few of us purchased tickets, and we make the track every Sunday morning after having a frat party the night before. But we never missed a game. Now we're blessed with a guy like Josh Allen, who with his struggles to even get drafted or go to college has now turned into this awesome quarterback, makes him fit right in with us. He's the ideal quarterback for Western New York. But then we have to remember for every one of him, there's about 20 other guys that never got it done. It's always going to be ups and downs, but I'll take it because I don't want to go to an amusement park and sit out riding the roller coaster because there's too many ups and downs. That from my brother-in-law, PJ, about what it's like being a Bills fan and how they think of Josh Allen, mixed in with a little bit of history of the city. I mean, I was moved by that. I immediately sent to the group, said, are you okay with me sharing this on air? And he said, absolutely, you can clean it up for me if you need to. PJ, I'm here to tell you, I didn't need to clean it up at all.
Right.
I read that word for word as you sent it, voice to text, I believe, in fact. Very well said by you, very well done by you. Now, for the rest of us, we want to see Josh Allen go out there and prove it in the playoffs and get Buffalo a Super Bowl. That's where America will rally behind Western New Yorkers like my brother-in-law, PJ, and everyone else that suffered there as a Bills fan and suffered through a lot of long winters of not winning a Super Bowl. How cool it would be if Josh Allen could be the guy, for every reason he just laid out, to be the guy to get them to a Super Bowl and to win it.
Hey, and their playoffs started well before last weekend.
Yeah.
You know, they had to win. They've been doing that. And they've been winning without necessarily Allen at his best, and sometimes at his worst, not even throwing for 100 yards in one of these wins. So they're able to win in different ways. They're running the football.
They're so battle-tested. It feels like they've been playing for their life, and they have. So this is nothing new.
They
to
turned
them.
it on whenever Philadelphia turned it off, really, around that same time.
I've got this weird feeling that KC coming to town is not going to faze them one bit. That this team is just different because of that playoff atmosphere every week, the last few weeks of the regular season. That it's not going to shake them to their core that Patrick Mahomes is running around making plays against them.
Mahomes in the playoffs, though. There's something about the
Will
elite,
Taylor
the elite.
Swift bring them to their knees? That is the question for Buffalo Bills
Well, the
fans
snow,
and players everywhere.
Calling for some more wintry weather in Buffalo this weekend.
Will this be the most time Taylor Swift's ever spent in Buffalo, New York for this trip? Has she had a show there before?
She probably had a show
Did
on
the
top
Eras
of Niagara
Tour
Falls
reach
or something.
Buffalo? I don't think it did.
Who
They didn't
knows?
play in She didn't play in Highmark Stadium.